get started. I am Amy Rosen, and welcome to the last session for today. Now, you guys have had, I'm sure, a long day of learning and networking and meeting people, so I'm going to try and make this last session of the day hopefully very informative for you guys and helpful. So we're going to talk to you today about life after testing positive. So we're not going to spend a lot of time talking about the test itself. There are other talks here that will give you a lot more detail about the test, but I wanted to go over some quick details about how Huntington's is inherited and what we mean when we say a positive test, just so that we're all on the same playing field. And then we've got two people here who have volunteered to be on this panel who will talk to you about their own experiences. And then we'll leave hopefully plenty of time for you all to ask questions. And we can take them either through the Q&A chat, or we can, if you're in the room, we'll just have you can raise your hand or you can type it in, whichever you prefer. All right? So how many people here have been to see a genetic counselor? The people in the room. Okay. And how many have done testing? Okay. All right. That just gives me an idea of kind of who I'm talking to. I know I can't ask the same of the people that are at home right now, but gives me an idea of who's in the room. All right. So these are some disclaimers. That this is not for care. You should consult with someone before you go do anything. Please do wear your mask if you are not eating, drinking, or presenting. Presenters may or may not be masked. And so let's move on to the gene. When we talk about the gene for Huntington's disease, what we're talking about is the ATT gene, which is one specific gene within our 25,000 genes, okay? And it is an error in that one gene that causes Huntington's disease. Nothing else causes Huntington's, right? So we've all got two of these HTT genes. We get one from our mother, we get one from our father, okay? And if we, since most of you have seen a genetic counselor, I'm buzzing through this, okay? But if we say this is a parent who has two normal functioning Huntington genes, and this is the parent who has one normal functioning Huntington gene and one HTT gene that is causing them to have Huntington's disease, when they have a child, that child has a 50% chance of either inheriting this Huntington gene here or this one here. And that's where that 50-50 chance comes in that people talk about if you have a parent with Huntington's disease, you've got a 50-50 chance of having Huntington's disease yourself. Okay? So for every pregnancy that a person who has Huntington's has, there is a risk of 50-50 for each pregnancy. Okay? And HD is caused by one part of the HTT gene being too long, which causes problems. Again, I'm talking quickly and kind of in general terms, so we're not going into the very specific parts of what the test is looking at and everything. Talking about the part of the gene that can be too long when the test is done, the part of the gene that we're looking at is those CAG repeats. They're also called the repeats or CAG repeats. So people call them different things, but it's just one part of the Huntington gene where CAG, which are building blocks that make up, three of the building blocks that make up our genes, repeat themselves over and over again. CAG, CAG, CAG. And the test looks at the length of those CAG repeats in both genes for a person. A negative test is if there are 10 to 26 repeats on both genes. Those are normal functioning Huntington genes, or that's not there anymore, the green genes that were in the other slide. 27 to 35 is also normal functioning. That person will not have Huntington's disease, but their children may be at risk for it. And that's because once the number of repeats is over 26, it is unstable when it's inherited. So it can change from a 27 or a 32 to a 40 or a 42. So it can expand in children, which will then cause a positive test result. Okay? So anything 36 and over may or may not cause Huntington's disease, and anything 40 and over will cause Huntington's disease during a regular lifespan. Okay? Questions about that information? Okay, in the room. Okay. Oh, yes, please. Please.
Why is it that the 36 to 39 may or may not that gray area?
Excellent question. And the reason is that probably if those people live to be 150, they would also have symptoms. But the gene is, once it's 40 or more, is sufficient to cause Huntington's disease. But it's not the only thing that affects whether someone has Huntington's or not. There's also other environmental factors and other genetic factors. And for the people who have between 36 and 39 repeats, those other factors are very important as to how long a person's life will go until they start to have symptoms. And so sometimes they get to 95 and they die of a heart attack before any symptoms have had a chance to show up because of other protective factors. Whereas someone else may not have those protective factors and start to have symptoms earlier. Okay. Yeah?
The 40 and above, that's what you would call full penetration.
Correct. Yep, full penetrance, exactly right. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
On the expansion from one generation to another, what's the varying statistics around how often
Is a good question. And I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I'm happy to talk to you about it afterwards. And the answer is yes, there are some numbers about that. And the numbers are different whether it's inherited from a father or from a mother. Okay. The most likely scenario is that the numbers would stay the same when they're inherited. So whether it's inherited from a father or a mother, the most likely situation is the number of repeats will stay the same. Okay. So the gene test itself is, you've probably heard people say, should be done at a Huntington's test center. It's not always done there, but I put it like that here because it should be, if it is at all possible, could be done at an HD testing center because there are genetic counselors there who are familiar with Huntington's and with the issues that might come up with testing predictively. You will get genetic counseling both pre and post testing. It can be done either by blood or through saliva. For those people who tested a while back, saliva was not always an option, but it is now. Testing improvements. The results take about 2 weeks to come back. Sometimes that can be a bit longer, depends on different types of factors, but about 2 weeks. And it is, like I said, usually not done at a private doctor's office. Some doctors will offer it. I wish they wouldn't. But some doctors, private offices do offer it, and then sometimes the results come back and they don't know how to interpret them. Or they interpret them incorrectly. Or they realize at that point that they don't know how to give the results and say, go talk to somebody else, which would have been much more helpful to do earlier. And then just the issues involved in genetic testing. Some doctors just don't know where to order it or what labs to use. Okay. So that is my incredibly quick run through of testing. And what we're talking about when we talk about a positive test is someone who has 36 or more repeats that come up on their genetic testing when the genetic test looks at that one place within their Huntington gene. And it is typically found that one of the genes has 26 and less, and that's the gene that was inherited from the other parent, the parent who did not have Huntington's disease. And then the 36 or more repeats is what makes the test positive. It really doesn't matter that the other one had less. The fact that one gene has 36 repeats or more can be enough to cause Huntington's disease in someone. And that's why we call that a positive test result. Okay. Questions about kind of those terms or the terminology we're talking about? Okay. Thank you. I know that was incredibly quick. So this is also my contact information if you guys are interested in getting in touch afterwards or have other questions that we don't get to today. Okay, I am now going to introduce to you Shante Khan and Elizabeth Cosbab, if they will both come up to the front. I'm going to have these ladies introduce themselves to you and tell you a bit about their stories. They have both done genetic testing, both did come back positive, and so we're going to have you hear about their stories and see what we can learn from them. Okay, so I think we'll have Beth go first. So Beth, if you could first just tell us a bit about before testing, what kind of, and before you even do that, tell us a bit about yourself. Just
Okay.
a word or
Yes.
two.
Hi, nice to see you all. Like she said, my name is Beth Cosbab, and just to give you a little background about myself, I'm originally from St. Louis. I grew up there with my parents and two younger brothers. And growing up, I knew nothing about Huntington's other than what I knew in biology class in like one quick lesson. But we knew there was something difficult with my dad. So my dad, who's one of 9 children himself, he was a normal dad. I was always kind of a quirky guy. And when I was in 3rd grade, he lost his job as a chemical engineer at Monsanto. And at that point, he just had some different emotional issues and started having anger issues and had jobs off and on with other various factors like narcolepsy and such until about 8th grade. And so that was a very difficult time, and my mom had to go back to work as a nurse. At one point had 3 different jobs to make ends meet, and then was the sole breadwinner starting when I was in high school, which all of that age was a very vulnerable age and a very difficult time for my family, but we didn't really know why, and we're just mad at him. And it wasn't until much later that some of those mood problems improved, and I graduated college and got married actually right out of college at 22 and moved down here with my husband, Ben. And it was, I wrote it down so I wouldn't forget what year it was. It was in 2010, which feels like a lifetime ago now, that my mom finally got my dad to the right doctor because we knew something was up. We had no idea what. And they took him to a movement specialist, a neurologist, and I even saw the doctor's notes that when they ran all the tests of like, Huntington's unlikely because no family history. That it was not in a vocabulary at all. And so when the test came back positive, it was a real shock. And I'll never forget the phone call. It was late in the evening, and my mom called me to tell me about it. And I remember running downstairs to my computer, like Googling Huntington's, and going, oh, expletive. And that was, it was about a year before my husband and I were planning to try for kids. So that was for us the first decision, the first how do we comprehend this? And I'm sure there's some of you in the room that have that same situation. So at that point, we were surrounded thankfully with family and friends who brought us to Emory and information, to Amy, and taking in all of the information that we could. And at that same time, it also ironically helped me forgive my dad for those years because I realized it wasn't in his control. So, it was like this, yin-yang situation of the extreme lows, but also this extreme high of forgiveness and such. And for me personally, and for my family, we're very faith-filled. I grew up Catholic, still am, and so that faith has been a huge factor in helping throughout this whole process, and believing that hardships and suffering have a purpose, and good can come out of all of that. And so that, even through all the roller coaster, that was a constant theme. So we went to Amy to do the pre-counseling, pre-testing counseling, and then at that point went ahead and got long-term care insurance before doing the testing, which was one of the best decisions we ever made. We were looked at funny because we were 25 getting long-term care insurance, but I'm so glad that we did. We got joint insurance together so that it helps each other out because, no matter Huntington or not, you don't know what the future's going to hold. So I'm very grateful that we did make that decision. And then we got the testing done, and that, I guess it was about 2 weeks in. It was like the longest 2 weeks ever. And then we got the call, the results were in, and
Beth, let
sorry.
me introduce for a moment and just ask you, before you got the test done, what were your expectations for the test? What were kind of thoughts running through your mind, if you can remember?
I firmly believed I didn't have it. So that was my expectation. I was ready to be the caregiver for my entire family and all those things because that's usually my role. So I was ready to be the knight in shining armor and not the other way around. And I was very glad that I had my husband there as support during the counseling and during the test itself. And it was kind of a blur too, And then when we did go in to get the results, I took the whole day off work in advance. I was a high school math teacher at the time, and I hadn't told many people about it. And since we had relocated here, most of my friendships were through work, and we were very nervous about insurance and job security and that kind of thing, so we didn't tell a lot of people. And I understood why, especially my husband was very protective, but then it also made me feel like I was very secretive about it too. But I had told a couple people, and so my boss understood when I needed the day off last minute. And we got the results, and I just fell apart. And it was a big, ugly cry, like the entire box of tissues, and one of the worst days of my life. It was. And that day, we just kept it between me and my husband. We planted tomatoes. And I needed to do something with my hands, and we're outdoor people. And I made an appointment with one of the priests at our parish, was also a friend of ours, and we met. I called him that day and made an appointment with him that evening. I'm very glad I did, and I almost wish I had pre-made that appointment for either way that the results would go to have it, but we were able to see him, and we talked with him and met with him several times at the coming weeks and months after that positive test result, which was very important for us, both individually and together as a couple. Then the next day was the second hardest day, because then I had to call my mom and tell my mom. And she was already dealing with this with her husband and then worried about her 3 kids. And we did that video call even before video call was like a thing, like on Skype, because it was just that important to do it face to face. And also that same day, one of my best friends from high school sent me a onesie that she announcing she was pregnant. And I called her to congratulate her and just didn't tell her, And my other best friend that I was a coworker with was very pregnant at the time with her second, so that was also difficult. But she's the one who looked up the support group information for me at Emory. And again, after the positive result, it took a long time to process things, but going to support group at Emory was really crucial for us. Especially in the beginning, we were pretty regular going the once a month to talk about things and such. But it was still hard. I was in a weird position because I was in the caregiver position and the patient, but not yet. It's like we're in this weird in between. And same with starting coming to conventions and such. The first couple of conventions I went to, I felt like that weird in between. But there must have been other people who also put that on their comment cards, because then conventions started having support groups for the pre-symptomatic people, which I was very grateful for, because we're in this weird in between. And so it helped both at support group and through convention, meeting other people like me that I talk to. And when you first get that positive result, you think about it all the time, but then it does get easier, and time gets easier. But the other critical decision we had to make was about kids. And since this was now in the spring of 2011, and we had talked about what we would do if we ever had trouble having kids, even before we were married. And then once we knew about my dad, we'd been talking about it since that fall. And we made the decision to do adoption. And I'm very glad we made that decision. 2011, what helped was focusing on something else and having another goal. We had always been planning to go to Italy that summer, so we had still planned that trip and lived our life to the fullest. And then when we got back that July, August, we started the adoption process. And I think it helped that we were a little bit younger, and we were matched with my son in December of that year. So it was like 5 months later. And then he was born in February 2012. And then I decided I always had wanted to be stay-at-home mom. And adoption wasn't easy. I'm not going to sugarcoat it because it's no walk in the park. It's not for the faint of heart. But it was a decision that my husband and I were both very comfortable with. And then we adopted again. The following summer in 2013, we're like, okay, we'll see. We'll try to get them about 2 years apart. And then we got matched within 2 months. And so my kids are 20 months apart. And so my son was born in Florida, and my daughter was born here. And it's still, life goes on, and it's always going to have its ups and downs. It helped having that goal. It's helped now pouring myself into parenthood and volunteering at church. I tutor. I was a preschool teacher, but now I'm focusing on my kids again right now. They're 8 and 10 now. And I don't think about Huntington's every day anymore. My dad's 74, and he's not doing as well as he was. So that is harder, and I worry about how people are going to look at me when I'm at that stage. But I feel that we've created strong friendships here. We're very strong in our faith. And I've got a big family support. And I worry about my family because, like I said, my dad was one of 9. And I'll tell you, some people asked about repeating. So my dad's count was 40. It's right scraping in there. And then I did jump up to 41. And my dad we don't know all my dad's siblings counts because some have tested, some haven't. Some have been more private about it. But one was 39. So we think that it's probable that it could have come from either one of my grandparents and been in one of those lower numbers that was possible to increase. Or could have been 38, 39 and didn't show, even though my grandma was in her 90s. So who knows? And that mystery is a little haunting sometimes. But that's at least my situation. And it's still, whenever I have anxiety or I have a twitch or I run into a doorway or something like that, I freak out, especially I'm 37 now. So we don't know. But I was also taught me to seize the moment. It's silly when my husband and I get in fights. We're like, this is dumb. We don't have time for this, And we just got back actually from a big trip out to Arizona and Utah. We went to Grand Canyon and Zion and Bryce and Capitol Reef. And, part of me, is a little I hope I can come back one day. I don't know what the future will be, but but to embrace being there in that moment and to be grateful for the time I have. I had a coworker who died of breast cancer at age 41. So you don't know. You don't know what time you have, and no matter what. And I hope that you all can, find joy in the moment and know that there's hope and there's possibilities and that there's reason for things happening and there's good that comes out of all the bad and the suffering too. So that's my story.
There's one question here directly for you.
Uh-huh.
Someone has asked, did you have to disclose your diagnosis when applying to adopt?
Good question. So it never directly came up. but I will admit that I'm honest to a fault. And I didn't want anything to come up later, like that I was hiding something. So for my son especially, because when you adopt across state lines, you have to fill this longer form of information called ICPC that you do disclose, like why you're adopting and such. And I did disclose it. And the group that we work with, which is here, based out of here in Atlanta Adoption Information Services, or AIS. They were fantastic, and they had me fill out all the paperwork and directed me with a home study to have a neurologist do an exam at the time to just write a letter to say I did not have Huntington's disease currently. So, and I actually, since it's a long time to get an appointment with an Emory neurologist, I went to another neurologist, but that letter satisfied them enough that there wasn't any Huntington's currently. I don't even think we had to disclose that for my daughter being born within state, but I never wanted it to be that we hid something and then would have to be paranoid about it.
Any other questions for Beth before we move on to Shantae?
So when you found out, you stated you're Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Did you kind of have a crisis of faith?
I did struggle. Yes, absolutely. I was like, I've done all the good things. I mean, obviously, I've made huge mistakes and everything in my life, but I'm like, what have I done so wrong? And, why do bad things happen to good people, especially like this? It didn't come from making a bad decision that a bad thing happened. It came just something completely out of my control. The same with any disease that comes from being outside someone's control. So yeah, I struggled. It was definitely bumpy, but it was also my faith that got me through. So it was both. It was a crisis, but it was a moment of relying on those roots and foundations that I had there. And it did take some growing back, and being able to adopt my kids and then get involved more with church through our Mother's Guild and stuff, that really reaffirmed and strengthened it again.
Just a note here that says no question, but thank you for sharing your story. There were so many feelings you described that I felt too. So Shantae, if you would, please tell us a little bit about yourself and then your story.
Hello. Okay, there we go. So, yes, thank you for sharing all of that. Yes, all of that and more. So many things that were aligned with things that I have experienced. But before we get to that part, my name is Shantae Can. I am a jazz soul musician based here in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up with my mother and my father, and the first thing I ever knew about Huntington's disease was through my grandmother, who used to come and visit every year when I lived in Chicago with my parents. And so I didn't know all the full details of everything. I just knew that she was sick and we had to go visit her whenever we could. And so I knew the name Huntington's, but that's about all I knew. And so I didn't even really know my grandmother, because when we were visiting her, she was beyond the stages of communicating. We just were in the nursing home, and I knew she would get really excited when we came into the room, and I knew this was excitement, or she was upset, or she was sad. It was just really, really basic, raw interpretation of emotion from what I could tell at that age. And I just knew that it was because of the disease that she couldn't talk to us or communicate with us effectively. So I knew what the progressed stages of it looked like at a very young age. But it wasn't until, of course, she ended up passing away of Huntington's when I was maybe a junior in high school. And so that was just that. That was an isolated event. It was what it was. And then it wasn't till later on where my mom ended up having difficulties, once again, anger, rage. And a lot of this is kind of memories that I know of my dad sharing to me, because I think when I was a little younger, I really didn't understand everything. So it was talking to my dad and knowing that he was concerned about some of her actions, and like, she couldn't, she was a music teacher in the school system for a long time. She was actually my music teacher at the school that I grew up at. But then there was a point, probably in my later teenage years, where things just kind of weren't adding up. There were concerns about her lashing out emotionally, these fits of rage, and I didn't necessarily know that it was connected to Huntington's. And my dad will also tell me that he was in denial about it being connected to Huntington's. He was in denial for a very, very long time, and kind of was just like, okay, well, maybe this is just things that are running in her family emotionally, but never put it on the genetic side. So there were rough patches between them automatically that I sensed had a deeper meaning, or a deeper reason for being. And my mom eventually got tested, and actually Miss Amy was one of the people that my mom was connected to when she first did her own discovery. And so, yeah, that was interesting, because I think we were all kind of hoping for the best, or hoping that maybe not, or hoping that maybe, but also because I saw my grandmother and what she kind of went through, it was a little easier for me to pinpoint and classify what was going on. Like, we weren't complete novices to the effects of Huntington's disease. We were saddened, of course. We were like, okay, yikes. Like, how are we gonna deal with this? And then I think just as my teenage self, I was probably a little more reserved and standoffish, and not really expressing my feelings about her going through what she went through, because I didn't want to necessarily meddle in my parents' business. And plus, I was dealing with my own sadness, not necessarily concerning me, but just concerning what my mom was going through, and just like, yeah, this is crazy. And so I did my best to hold it together, kind of like by myself. And I kind of like just went to my friends, and there were neighborhood friends that I was close with that I shared, this information with, and they were kind of like helping me and coaching me through it. And so that was happening. And I became a full-time touring musician at one point. And so I think I just try to keep busy as I could. That was kind of like my vice. Just keep busy, keep working, keep creating. I had the music thing, which was such a big part of me, and my faith was also a big part of me. So I grew up in church, and my dad is actually a pastor, and so those roots were very, very firm within me. However, it did not negate from the turmoil, the emotional roller coasters that it kind of took me on. And so I think after my mom was kind of, she had tested positive and been like diagnosed officially, I was just like, okay, I didn't think about me at all. I didn't want to think about me. I was just like, all right, there's no point in it, because I don't want to be sad. I don't want to be angry. I just want to make sure like I'm enjoying the time with my mom that I have while I do. So let that be that. And then I did notice that not a lot of people knew what Huntington's disease was. It wasn't this big thing like, oh yeah, I've heard of this. It's really like a smaller niche type um, type of disease where there's a select few that even are aware of it or like have even heard of it. And so I felt like I kind of I felt like I owed it to the people who believed in me as an artist and as a musician and as a music lover and as a faith-filled believer. I felt like I owed it to people to try to bring awareness. And so kind of halfway or midway through a certain part of my career, I got the idea of wanting to possibly do like a documentary on YouTube. Like that was what I wanted to do because YouTube was kind of, it was kind of just beginning its reach. And I was like, okay, let me look up and see how many people are on YouTube that are even talking about HG. Let's just see like what the statistics are or what the knowledge is. And once again, there was like nobody. There was like 1.5 people that were talking about it on YouTube. So I was like, okay. I just kind of got this unction, like maybe if I can bring awareness to it in video form through documentary style, maybe this will not only give people a deeper part of me than just people that know me for my music. I wanted to kind of give more, and I wanted to be able to relate to people who are going through things beyond the surface of what you see, beyond the surface of just their job, beyond the surface of what their gifting is, beyond the surface of, the everyday, hey, how you doing, small talk type thing. So I wrote down like I wanted to possibly do a documentary style thing. And at this time, I hadn't been tested yet. And I was kind of talking to my dad about it. And my dad just like, we kind of reconnected years later after my mom was officially diagnosed, and like he just opened up in front of me. Like I had never seen him cry before in like most of my childhood. And then one day we just had a conversation and he just kind of like unleashed all of this oppressed emotion. And I was just like, wow, this is a lot. This is a lot. And so he kind of encouraged me to get tested. And then I was like, okay, well, what if I document the process of me getting tested? And then, it will kind of be, kind of open the doors to just have the conversation, kind of face the fears and just make it a relatable type thing. So I didn't know how well or how not well it was going to do. It was just completely something that I felt like called or led in a purpose to do. So one way or another, I got connected with a documentary maker person, a documentarist. Yes, y'all know what I'm trying to say. I got connected with him around the time that I was supposed to test. And yeah, it was crazy how everything kind of just started to fall in line. And I had him come into the facility where I got tested with Amy. And yeah, it was like there was a whole he took video of the whole process, kind of, sort of, more or less. And we were just on this journey of like sharing this with people. And so now, because I was already in the public eye as an artist or as a vocalist, I now had this other cause that I was fighting for and that I could connect to and feel like I was family with. And even though I wasn't necessarily going to the support group, I had a support system of people like in my church or in my friends and family that I can kind of lean on. So even though I was scared as heck, I was like, okay, I need to go through this because I feel like this is going to be a like monument or pivotal for not just my own family, but families in the future that I'll come into contact with. So, I eventually scheduled a test, and I had all of my people there. I had some really dear friends of mine there. I had some pastor friends of mine there. I had the documenter. Yes, we'll just call him that. He was there, and maybe two other people, including Amy. And so, yeah, it was crazy.
I think that that's a good point to mention to everyone is when you are getting your results, you can bring who you want.
Yep.
Right? You can have them join these days. You can have them join by Zoom. But if you want 10 people in the room,
Yes.
we'll find a room to put 10 people in.
Yep.
You know, so that's all right.
Yes.
What were your expectations before you got tested?
Okay, if we're being completely truthful, okay. I had a piece about it. I had a piece. I was absolutely hoping and praying for it to be a negative result. But even still, there was still this underlying piece about it. And kind of similar to what you said, I almost was like, yeah, I'm gonna go. They're gonna be like, you're negative. You don't have to worry about A, B, and C. And I'm just going as a follow up, as a formal, as an informal thing to just, do everything that I need to do and be there for the cause. It's gonna be great. I'm gonna encourage people. I'm gonna, still help people that are on their way. But I did not expect a positive result. I did not. And so after you said, the numbers and that the test was positive for the gene, I know this is not an official diagnosis, but this is a testing gene positive. And so after you said those words, it was like my brain just shut down. Like everything got silent. And I no longer heard you. I no longer heard anybody in the room. I was barely there myself. It was like an outer body experience. Like, okay. Like, did she really just say that? Okay. It's like blackout. Like, I don't even remember what happened until like I came to and you were still talking and still reading the things. And I'm like, oh, okay, this is actually happening. Like, this is not a movie. This is my life right now. Okay. And of course, there were lots of tears from myself, from my friends, from everybody that was there. So it was a very life-altering experience in that moment. But I do remember one thing that I said to you. Like, I feel like my last words in that session were, but I still have hope. And I don't know what possessed me. Well, I do know what possessed me, but I have no idea how my mouth was even able to form that sentence other than the grounding of my faith. Yes, did I feel played? Did I feel bamboozled? Did I feel lied to? Yes. I was like, what? Guys, is this a joke right now? Because I was like, I had that faith moment. Like, my faith was so strong. And this is what I want to happen. This is what I'm praying for. But just hearing those results kind of put a jolt in the system. And I think after that, immediately I went into a hole. I went into like a dark place. Not to a point where I was gonna do anything crazy, but my mind was on the loop. It was the anxiety, it was the rumination. It was like, wow, okay, well, like, I'm thinking about my future. I'm thinking about my future kids, my future husband, my future whoever. Like, who's gonna want to be with somebody that tests positive? How are my kids gonna be? How is this gonna be? How am I gonna tell the world? How, like, I had a hard time being comfortable with the word disease attached to my name or something that I was doing, or it was hard for me to grasp. But yeah, I think after I had my moment and I allowed myself to feel all the things and not terminate my emotions, like let myself feel those things, that's when true healing really, really started to take place. And that's when I started to get stronger, and I started to not obsess about it every single day, maybe every other day, to every other week, to, twice a month, to now, if we want to fast forward more to the current state, it's like I'm able to be more confident. I'm able to just be secure in who I know God called me to be. I'm able to be who I'm supposed to be through my music and through just my daily interactions with everyday people. It put more purpose in me. It put more drive in me. It put more intentionality in me. And so that's you can ask whatever you want to ask in between that, because I know that was a lot.
Thank you. Yeah, that was
Yeah.
wonderful. Thank you for sharing all of that. I do have another question, which was, so I know that your faith was very, very important to you, as was your circle of friends. Was there anything additional that helped bring you through? Any other supports or resources or anything like that?
I would say connecting with people, or knowing that there's another world outside of my own self and my own family that's going through just like everybody else. To see people that were associated with the HDSA, having the opportunity to speak at the genetics conference a couple of years ago, that was really cool. And not for just HD specific people, but other genetic diseases and other just, illnesses and other chronic things that are out there that are plaguing people, because we're, at the end of the day, we're all people, and we all kind of experience emotions in our own different way, through our own different experiences of our own different filters and what we've been through. But at the end of the day, we're all human, and that kind of binds us together. So knowing that there is a family out there outside of just what I was going through personally, that makes it helpful. And to see those resources being shared, even though I've never been to the support group, I still get the emails. I still see your name on them. I still am encouraged by that. That there is progress being made in technology and in research. I'm hopeful for those moments. So those are some of the other things that kind of inspired me.
Yes.
My question is, was the genetic counseling important, and did it help with understanding the results and being able to handle it, basically? Because our situation is we had a 21-year-old Marine that got tested. The doctor told him over the phone, that's it. And his genetic counseling entailed a 5-minute meeting with the counselor saying, why do you want to do this? What do you expect? Are you okay? And how long was your counseling? And then, like I say, his meeting was maybe 5 minutes, and that's it. And he said, okay, go get tested. Like I say, did the genetic counseling help you understand what may be coming, your life, your future life? And did it help dealing with the answer? Both. I'm asking both.
Yes, it definitely helped. I can't remember how long the counseling process was, but I don't know if I think it depends on what the quality is and the understanding of the person doing the counseling. And I know, if somebody would have told me of have a 5-minute conversation with me, I would feel some kind of way. Like I would feel unsupported. I would feel unnurtured. I would feel unprepared. And I feel like I was blessed enough to be paired with people that basically told me everything that I ever needed to know things that I even didn't know that I needed to know about Huntington's disease. And, just as far as the support that's out there, the support that's offered, I felt very supported. Like my friends and family, they kind of, were offering the support that they knew was out there. Or if they heard of something like on the internet, they would be like, okay, I heard about this thing that might be helpful to what you're going through. And, people that were dealing with their own autoimmune diseases, they would also send me resources as far as like diets and things that you can kind of do yourself, that help you battle and fight certain things. So yeah, that was my experience with it. I don't know what your experience was with the counseling.
It was definitely more than 5 minutes. I can't remember exactly how long the meeting was. My husband and I had done a lot of research online ahead of time, so including HDSA's website and such, and so and that information has only been added to. So, but Amy did answer our questions for what we did have at the time, and I'm glad that we went into the office to go just so it wasn't over the phone like that. Or if it is, it does have to be over the phone because some people do live farther away. I'm Marietta, I'm not that far from Emory, but obviously some people are more remote. To still, if it has to be done that way, to know like you're not alone, that someone's with you and you get those results over the phone. Because after Amy told me the results, the rest was kind of a blur and my messy cry. And there was a lot. Yeah, there was a lot that we knew already. It was just accepting that. And so for me, what was also important after getting those results was going to support group, which was helpful, especially at the beginning. Recently, we've not been in as much because kids are 8 and 10, so there's a lot going on Saturdays. And coming to convention to get more information about the disease and see people firsthand and get to be around people that you didn't have to explain the disease first before starting the conversation. They just got it. Some of my best memories from my first convention was just like sitting with new people at mealtime and introducing myself. And so I got to understand the disease a lot more through those experiences. And since then, as I mentioned before, meeting with our parish priest as counseling has helped. And talking and being more open with friends has also been another big support as well, so that I no longer was hiding it anymore. It did help that we had that long-term insurance, and I was staying-at-home mom anyways, so I was able to be open about it and not let the disease have that power over me. I would no longer being fearful of it, but being open about it. And since then, I've done off and on again with a therapist that doesn't necessarily a Huntington's therapist, but it's someone who's done her research to know what it is. So I think it's all those pieces, kind of put together, and everyone's going to be a little bit different. And it's unfortunate that you had that experience.
Support,
Yeah.
like I say, it was over the phone. Yeah, you're positive.
Yeah.
I will
And the
say,
next thing we know is we get a phone call from him saying, "Hey, I'm positive. We're in Alaska. He's in San Diego, so we jump on the plane and hey, how you doing? What's going on? Blah blah blah." And the thing that really put a kibosh on the whole system was we asked the doctor, "Why did you tell him over the phone?" He goes, "Well, he's a Marine, 21 years old. They can handle anything."
so I will say that most genetic counseling sessions last at least an hour for Huntington's disease. And that was why I said at the beginning, I really, really stress that it should be done at a Huntington's testing center, because there are things to think about before. There are, I forget which one of you said, but there are things that we tell you about that it's possible you didn't think about yet. But that's our job, is to make sure that whether it's important in your life or not, we at least mention it, and then you decide if it's important to your life or not. And unfortunately, a lot of doctors, and so this doctor that the Marine went to is not,
He was a neurologist.
yeah, isn't alone.
He was not a movement disorder neurologist. He
Right.
was just a plain neurologist.
But he's not alone in thinking that, yeah, I'm a doctor, I can order a test. It's a test. I order tests all the time. And then ordering it, and they do give out results all the time on the phone. So they just don't think about all the implications that it has, not only for that person, but also for the rest of their family. And as a Marine, I would think in particular, I mean, that's got a ton of implications to think through before getting tested. And unfortunately, I mean, and now hopefully he's gotten some assistance afterwards to think through.
Not with the Marines.
Not with the Marines, no, but maybe
They
outside.
educated that neurologist far more than the neurologist educated.
I'm sure. Maybe he can go outside the system to see someone who can give him
He
some.
got a little defensive because I asked him if he knew anything about it.
Yeah. I have some questions here. One of them is, how do either of you handle or choose sharing your status with others currently?
So currently, I'm very open about it. But as I mentioned before, it took a long time to get to that point. But I'm actually just told someone at my kids' swim team practice this morning. Because it, like I mentioned, it's more empowering. And I'm not hiding something about myself that is, a critical part of my life and explains a lot of my life choices. I don't necessarily, say it at the drop of a hat, but if someone asks me, why did you adopt? I tell them, but if people assume you have other reasons for adopting, they assume a lot of things. But a lot of things, I let it go in that kind of situation. But if someone's genuinely interested, I take it as an opportunity to, like you, to educate and to make people aware of Huntington's disease, because so many people don't know anything about it. And I'm very comfortable with that, but I will say that took me a while. I mean, I got tested 11 years ago, and it took me until getting really closer friendships to just tell people, easily like that. But the more I've talked about it, the easier that has become. So, but it takes a while, and everyone's on their own timeline.
Well, I think every case is unique to every individual. These guidelines for, onset and diagnosis and all these other things. This is one disease that everybody's different.
Absolutely.
Everybody's different.
Absolutely, everyone's different.
And there's no set classic
No, this is what it looks like for everyone. No,
Yeah.
that's not
Everybody's different.
not how Huntington's works. Yeah.
Yeah.
Shante, did you have something to add?
I was just gonna say what she said.
Okay, perfect. I think we
You
have
got
another
it.
question. Yeah.
So, my name's Melissa, and I just got my master's in social work, and now I'm just starting at a HD Center of Excellence, so fairly new to this world and just trying to absorb it as best as I can. And there are, people at the clinic that I see that are pre-symptomatic, and I guess my question to you is, how did the social worker, how have you found help through social workers at the testing center, or what do you wish they would have done? Because it is like an in between, and sometimes I struggle with how to offer my support. I don't know if that made any sense.
Yeah, the social workers that I've dealt with through Emory have been through support group, and my parents are in St. Louis and and have done that support group. I think mostly Zoom right now, still. But what has been beneficial when we've compared notes and such is that every month when we met, there was time together and there was time to split. Now it was hard for me being in that weird position. But finally, when there was someone else who was similar to my position, at least we were kind of able to separate it together as well. And I think treating it as 3 separate groups is really important. because when you're in this in-between, it's like, it's awkward with the caregivers because it's also potentially about you, and you don't want to make them not share as much, but it's awkward with someone who's full on symptomatic because you're not at that point. And I will say, like, sometimes I felt like I was even probably, by other people, like, are you sure you don't have symptoms yet? Are you sure? I'm like, I'm sure. Like, but that sometimes got a little bit difficult. But I know it's important to have that split up time, because my mom is a caregiver. There was things she's like, if we didn't split up, I couldn't say that in front of your dad, So that was important. But I also think another thing is continuing that follow-up, like 2 weeks after the test, a month after the test, 6 months after the test, because like as you process it, especially in those first couple of years, there's a lot of emotions that flood. And that roller coaster ride, you might think you're okay, and then you fall off, like go to the deep end and so forth. And so I think continuous follow-up and just touching base, whether it's a phone call or an email, just to check in, would be really helpful. And to continue to give new resources and reminders and about, there's clinical studies or support groups if you're interested in. And also I would love to be reached out to about things like, I know that you are this weird in between. Did you know that there's a Zoom support group, every other Sunday at 5 o'clock Eastern time that maybe is over several different, from several different clinics? Because some of those things, I will say sometimes it's still hard that I don't at this stage inundate myself with information and look through HDSA's website as much as I used to, because I need to live life, But so I would be really helpful if someone would reach out to me. My status, where I'm at, let me know what's new.
Such a good idea.
So,
Yeah.
Shantae, anything to add?
I don't have anything to add because I didn't have any. I didn't deal with any social workers or anything like that. The closest thing that I dealt with a social worker was with my mom and her personal care facility, and then her moving from a personal care home to a nursing home. That was a really interesting transition, because I don't think a lot of places are really equipped to handle Huntington's disease, and so they often can get overlooked or it can be crazy. I remember I felt a lot of kind of ways when I would go over to the personal care home, I don't think she's getting service the way that she needs to or attended to. I just felt kind of bad because there was nothing that I could do personally. My dad, he had moved back to Ohio, so it was just me kind of looking after her, which it still is. It's gotten a lot easier because she's in a nursing home where they can be a little more one-on-one attentive to her. So even though it sucks to see her go in there, they're much better they're better equipped to handle the situation. And even though a lot of people there did not know what it was, we had to still educate them on what it was, but they're still just better equipped. So I feel much better about that. That's all I have to say.
Beth, on the point about being reached out to, is it similar on the clinical trial aspect? There's a lot going on, and it's now kind of getting to this younger-ish opportunities to participate. Are you more proactive on staying up to date, or would you rather a phone call, hey, you might qualify, here's the website?
I'm much better with a phone call. I am in the enroll study, so I've been told that I will be reached out to if there's something that would be particularly for me individually, that would be for me. Now, it helps also that my husband keeps up with most things, and because he is very much on the scientific side of dealing with it, and I kind of rely on him to point me in some of those right directions as well. But yeah, because like I said, life gets busy, and I don't want to sit and worry about it all the time. But I also don't want to miss an opportunity for something that would be right up my alley. So I do kind of rely on both Enroll and my husband to alert me. But if there was, a social worker or something someone in particular that if there was something blaring that I should know about, it would be amazing if someone would reach out to me, because it'd be so easy to miss it, in the daily, news cycle or something like that. Yeah.
Or if you're not checking in with the clinic all the time.
Yeah, I mean, I do now like baseline with a neurologist at Emory, but that's once a year. If they let me know, great. So that would be another way to get in contact with me, to let me know something specific, because there is so much out there. You just, walk around the atrium today and it's like, oh, should I know about all this stuff? Should I do every single trial? No, that's just way too overwhelming. And I feel like that's part of the role with the social worker, is to figure out what suits your, particular needs, and then to also help weigh the pros and cons. Because I'm always worried about, what if I do a trial that then would eliminate me from another trial? That can answer, whether that them or the neurologist can answer those kind of questions. Yeah.
Hi, so I'm Catherine. I'm actually another social worker. I feel bad working in dating. So I work for a nonprofit. We do anonymous genetic testing, and I just wanted to put this out there to the room. I hate to club for anybody right now, but we developed a post-testing couples retreat. So it's a way to meet other people. I think it sounds
Great
like
idea.
it's something that connecting with people who are walking the same path
Mhm.
is part of healing, or at least surviving.
Yeah.
So it's open to anybody. It's virtual. So just putting that out there as HCH. I apologize. I don't want to hijack in any way, but I think it's an important piece that I hear you guys kind of talking about, that support group. It's a different type.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's a great idea. Thank you. And, yeah.
So my question is primarily for Beth, but if you have input too, I'd love to hear it. I'm also an in-betweener. I'm in my 30s. I tested 41, so I'm right there with you, Beth. I get all that. As an in-betweener, we tend to out our families when we're open about it. Anybody who knows who your parents are watches which parent it could be. Anybody who knows your siblings, your cousins, they're all aware that it's a risk for them too, because it's a family disease. So
Yeah.
you decided to adopt kids. Are you open with your adoption with your children, because you kind of out them as not being biological because they're not at risk? Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely.
How does that go hand in hand and play into your life?
Well, with adoption, that's very much that, when you adopt, you're basically, encouraged and required basically to tell your kids that they're adopted. It's very different than a few generations ago. And most adoptions are semi-open. Some are fully open. Ours are semi-open, where we have unlimited contact with their birth moms and send pictures and letters. And but that's it for our particular case. Some are more open than that, but most are pretty limited. So birth moms don't know, but our kids know. So our kids know about the adoption and about Huntington's. And we just have always phrased it in an age-appropriate manner. And as they're getting older and seeing my dad progress, another plug, oh my gosh, I forgot, someone wrote a children's book, and he's a speaker here, and I can't remember. My mom bought the book for my kids to, but that was very helpful. It's like Finding Grandma's Smile or something like that. So she bought that for my kids, and that's been one conversation stop of knowing Grandpa does funny things, and now that he has more movements than he had before, it's easier for them to see it versus when it would be emotional or cognitive. They wouldn't quite understand, what we were talking about. And we have from a young age, because I never wanted there to be a point that they found out at one moment, that we've told them that, because they've even asked, why did you adopt us? And I've said, because mommy has the same gene that grandpa has, but it's not going to happen for a long time. And we kind of leave it at that. And it's going to happen, but not for a long time. I don't want to scare them or anything. And so that they know and that they're in that world. And when they get a little bit older, and I feel are able to come to convention and meet other kids that will have to deal with a parent that way, I think that's going to be very critical for them. But right now they're a little young and they both have ADHD, so they're acting even younger than they are. But in terms of like outing your family and things like that, I just make sure what I say is as generic as possible. People could obviously go deep diving into who I am and watch this video and, et cetera, but I'm not going to tell you which of my aunts and uncles. I'm not going to tell, and their numbers or anything like that. I'll just, keep that broad for their privacy's sake. But for me, because it's obvious with my dad, I didn't have to go through that, me finding out of my dad in particular, because I knew first, and it's so obvious when you meet him. Even a few years ago, before symptoms were getting worse, it was obvious, if that makes sense.
There is another question here, which I can't necessarily answer, but maybe since we have a bunch of social workers in the room, they might be able to answer. It is, are there Huntington's disease support groups for people of color to help increase comfort and address unique needs? And I know that Emory's cannot do that because we're just not big enough. I know that the HDSA has online support groups. I don't know that any of them are necessarily addressed specifically to people of color or of any other group, but I'm not sure. Do you guys know?
Not in my area. Yeah,
Okay.
I know the online support groups, I don't think there's any that are specific to people of color. There's a couple that are specific to status, and there's a couple that are specific to age and to topical kind of, like family planning and things like that. But I don't know that there's any.
So just in case people online couldn't hear the answer, nobody in the room knows of any particular groups that are specific to people of color. The ones for HDSA, some of them are specific to people of specific ages or gene status, or specific needs or of interests like IVF with PGD and family planning or things like that. But it is an excellent question, and one I will probably mention to the HDSA. It's a good one. Shante, there is a question here for you. It'll be an interesting one to answer. Okay. What is the name of the documentary and where can we see it?
Oh, is that really a question? Okay, great. Okay, so it's in the works as we speak. We're still kind of tying up some loose ends on it. I would love for it to be released sometime between end of this year / top of next year is kind of what we're going for. But it's called The Beauty of It All, or no, it's called Beautiful Braves. All right, we had a title change, and so it is called Beautiful Brave.
Beautiful Brave.
Yes, that's all the information I can say right now. Once again, still tying up the loose ends and making sure we have everything necessary, but it is in the works, so be looking out for it. That's
we
all.
will for sure announce it at our center when it
Yay.
comes out. So.
Yes, I'm excited about it, guys.
Exactly. Any other questions? I have one last question for each of you, and that is for people who are thinking about testing, who may test positive or who do test positive, what either last words of wisdom or recommendations or thoughts would you leave them with today?
I would say, as you've mentioned, to make sure that you're going to a genetic counselor or a neurologist that knows specifically about HD, and to do the steps of long-term care insurance or life insurance if that's what you need personally. For us, we knew I was going to be a stay-at-home mom and my husband working, so that wasn't what we needed to focus on. And I also think it's important to have that support. That group of people that you tell, that can be a small group or a large group, and that you have, that one person or those couple people with you that day when you find out the results, and that whole day is off work, maybe the next day is off work, because even if the other side of it is the survivor's guilt of it. So to have that and to preemptively make yourself an appointment to talk to someone, a therapist that you know and trust, or a priest, or a pastor, whoever that might be, to set yourself up for that. So when if things crash, that you have those things ready for you, and that then after that you take one day at a time, and it's awful, but it gets better, and there is still joy. There's still life after testing positive.
Beautiful.
Lovely. I agree with everything. And I'll just say stay hopeful, A gene positive testing today doesn't always necessarily have to have the death sentence or the ending, or it doesn't have to be final. Research is evolving, technology is evolving. There's new things every day that we didn't even know existed 5 years ago or 10 years ago, or so just stay hopeful.
Love that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.